Welcome back to another episode of the Thinking Strongman. I'm Bob Wanamaker, and thought I'd kick off a mini series talking about injury and pain. It seems like a timely topic in that we've had a pretty high-level powerlifter recently get seriously injured. I'm talking, of course, about Brandon Milley. I hope Brandon recovers quickly, well, and gets back on the platform to show his tremendous strength. And then, terribly, we had a CrossFitter in the past couple weeks fracture a couple vertebrae and sever his spinal cord doing an aborted snatch, I guess we'll call it. Terrible accident. I hope that Kevin likewise recovers as best he possibly can and can move forward. I'd like to ask a very basic question that seems somewhat silly. But what is an injury? Well, obviously there's the physical trauma. So I tear a hamstring and we have, the grading system. I've got a grade 1, a grade 2, a grade 3 tear. I'll get an MRI done, see how bad it is. Or I'll just judge from the amount of bleeding, the amount of swelling. I'll take appropriate measures. So there's the physical description of the injury. But there's more that goes into an injury than just that physical issue. And witness the timelessness of this topic. One of the most common questions that I get, it seems like nearly every week, is, hey, I got an injury. Can I train? Or, hey, I got an injury. Can I compete in 4 weeks? Something along those lines. So obviously there's more to it than just the physical. And I think it's a useful exercise to ask ourselves exactly what's involved with an injury. So there's an emotional response attached to an injury. There's an emotional response attached to pain, which is typically part of an injury. Pain is, or more accurately, the perception of pain is an evolutionary advantage that's hardwired into our nervous system. The species who best perceive pain are the species who have an edge in natural selection and in survival. Because instead of blindly continuing whatever activity they were doing, they realized that, hey, something's wrong. It's a feedback mechanism for the body. So you have this emotional aversion that's hardwired, and that impacts you greatly, and you have to acknowledge that. Now, acknowledging that does not mean that you dwell on it. It does not mean that you get despondent. It does not mean that you throw up your hands and say, my career is over, or how am I ever going to get back on track, or any of those things. Now, you'll have those thoughts. They're perfectly natural. I think the key is you have to acknowledge those thoughts somehow. Writing about them is a great way to do it. If you don't maintain a blog, well, first of all, you should be maintaining a training blog of some sort. Even if it's just jotting down sets, reps, weights, intensity, RPEs. You should also deal with some subjective commentary on each training session. And certainly if you're injured, you need some subjective commentary about your injury. And by expressing those emotions, you have dealt with them much more effectively, and you can put them behind you. You can't change the fact that you've had this injury. You can't change the fact that you have these attendant emotional responses that are hardwired, but you can change how you respond to them as a rational being. Aside from the emotional aspect, there's a different mental aspect. And that mental aspect comes into a longer term fear, I'll call it. And it's very difficult for some individuals to get back under the bar when they've been injured. Great analogy is motorcycle racing, or even just motorcycle riding. You'll get guys who are decent riders. They start pushing the limits of their bike. We all know them. I think Top Gun was largely about them. And as you're pushing your limits on the bike, eventually you lose it. And you lose it typically in a curve. So, you get your bike fixed, you get your body fixed, you come back, and you find it's very difficult to go through a curve. Trust me, been there, done that. It's very difficult to heel that bike over and have confidence that you're going to maintain traction, that you're not going to high side, that you're not going to lose it in any number of ways. It's called getting back on the horse. Same thing goes with an injury. It's very difficult for some people to trust that injured area. Another legitimate concern is that sometimes injuries never heal properly. There's not a lot of justice there. Sometimes they just don't. All you can do as an athlete and as a coach of yourself is ensure that you're taking the best steps to get the best possible recovery. So you don't want to start training heavy too early. You don't want to skip physical therapy. You don't want to ignore your PT's rehabilitation orders. You want to do all those things that are good and do everything you can to foster that injury recovery. That includes, again, paying attention to the mental attitude, not taking a defeatist attitude, taking a positive attitude, but not denying that the injury has occurred either. Living in a state of denial doesn't permit you to make any progress. So, you acknowledge the injury has happened, you acknowledge you have these emotions, you acknowledge that there's going to be a mental struggle to move the same weight you were moving. You acknowledge all these facts, and then you begin to deal with them. By maintaining a positive outlook, you find that there are opportunities provided to you by this scenario. Yes, it sucks to be injured. Yes, there's a downside, obviously. And the downside that we typically think of is it impedes our progress as an athlete. Well, I look at it this way. My progress as an athlete is probably capped out at, let's be generous for me, and let's say that someday I'll be able to squat 900 pounds if everything goes perfectly. That's probably not true, but bear with me. Not many people will be able to squat over 900 pounds. Not many people will squat 900 pounds. Some of those people will squat 900 pounds at a relatively young age. I think I saw one of the Lillibridges just squatted 850 raw at the age of 23 or 26. Some people hit it very early. But you know what? Chances are he's not going to squat much above that. Now, he might be an exception and might break 1,000, but there's not many people who do that in their entire powerlifting career, regardless of injury status. So, how has my progress been impeded? Well, it might be impeded by not recovering from the injury. Okay, so I have to deal with that. But certainly time is not the issue. I now have the opportunity to learn more about my body, to learn how it responds to the injury, to learn how it responds to the rehabilitation process, to learn how to better foster recovery in case I get more seriously injured. So take a fairly small hamstring tear. I learn the recovery techniques, I learn how to maximize my chances for full recovery, and then, God forbid, that I have a more significant injury, say and adductor detachment, I at least have a leg up on understanding how to recover from that. And let's face it, we're in a sport, powerlifting, strongman, whatever, an iron sport. There is a risk of injury. There is a risk of a sudden, acute injury cropping up, and we have to deal with it. So it's best to have a plan, to control the variables that go into it, to collect data when it does happen to us, to log our experience, and to be able to move forward from that in a rational manner, and don't be governed by emotion. Thanks for watching, and remember, evolution matters. Train like an animal, think like a human.